I have clients come to me and they're like, I know you're anti-Botox and I get a lot of it, but I think if and when you were ever curious to look at what lives underneath that, it's not the Botox. The Botox is a symptom of something deeper that you are running from, right? And so it's about looking at that. It's never about shame. But I will tell you, as women, if we feel attacked and othered and shamed around every corner, we can't have any real conversations. And that I am not a stand for. It is time for us as women to have these hard, elevated conversations and not give 10 million trigger warnings or think, oh, now everyone's going to feel other, they're going to feel shame, they're going to feel bad. No.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Plenty. I have an amazing guest today, and her name is Amanda Hanson. She's the Midlife Muse on the internet, and she has taken the world by storm with her somewhat controversial but very powerful perspective on women and aging and beauty, specifically what she has to say about cosmetic enhancements. And I can't wait for you to dig in. This episode is a little bit gritty. It might challenge some of your own practices and beliefs, but it is absolutely beautiful and a very important conversation. Enjoy. Welcome to Plenty. I'm your host, Kate Northrup, and together we are going on a journey to help you have an incredible relationship with money, time, and energy, and to have abundance on every possible level. Every week, we're gonna dive in with experts and insights to help you unlock a life of plenty. Let's go fill our cups.
Please note that the opinions and perspectives of the guests on the Plenty podcast are not necessarily reflective of the opinions and perspectives of Kate Northrup or anyone who works within the Kate Northrup brand.
Amanda, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming a second time. Our listeners don't know this, but you were so generous to come back. Something happened with the footage, and we were meant to have this conversation again, but different.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you have a revolutionary stance around women and aging and beauty. How would you want to say today what that revolutionary stance is, just to kick us right off?
I think for me, it's this belief that as I'm watching the world move along, I'm a 51-year-old woman who is immersed in that world. And what I see playing out before me globally is really alarming and concerning. And the reason I believe that to be is because we are losing the faces of aging women. And I think about my 21-year-old daughter, and I think about all of the young women who are watching this happen. And I'm wondering where we got the message that aging for women, not for men, but for women in particular, is somehow a failure, is somehow so embarrassing we couldn't possibly show it to the world. So my stance is that we are in an epidemic of our times for women, particularly now that we see 10-year-old girls doing Get Ready With Me on TikTok. And all of this sensation around Sephora, some of their biggest consumers right now are the 10 to 12-year-old range. I remember being 10.
I do too.
I don't even think that I took time to look at myself in the mirror. I was climbing trees. My fingernails were in the dirt. We were building forts in the woods behind our house. So I'm very concerned for what is happening for young girls. This stance I have taken 11 years ago when I was approaching 40 and watched all of the women around me starting to panic. And I didn't understand what was happening. I worked, one of my first jobs in college, I worked on the Alzheimer's unit of a nursing home where I took care of Alzheimer's patients. And also with my grandmothers, being surrounded by people who were aging, really aging with deep crevices on their face was such a joy for me, something I so deeply enjoyed. I found so much wisdom in every single story they told and in the moments that I got to be with them. And I remember thinking when I was very, very young, even 19 years old, 20 years old, that I couldn't wait to see that journey play out for myself. So it's something that's been there for a very long time for me, and I just decided to go public with it.
I love that.
Yeah.
What about your mom? Was she someone, and is she someone, like, what's her relationship been like with aging, and what was modeled for you?
Well, I think I want to back up even one step further before I get to my mom, is I was standing at her mother's funeral, my grandmother's, when she was 87, several years ago. And I was in the receiving line at the funeral, and everybody who came through said over and over and over again, your grandmother was so beautiful. And that was it. And then the next person and the next person. And I hungered for more. I knew my grandmother as well, and I knew that her priority was her beauty. And it broke my heart. I thought, on the day that I die, at my funeral, I want people telling revolutionary stories about what I did and the impact I made, because the way I look is the least interesting thing about me. And so I know that my mother grew up with that influence as well, and has for her entire life been an energy of berating herself in one form or fashion or another. She's in awe of how I show up in the world, particularly with my gray hair. But she is learning, I think, to love herself on this journey. She's 75 now. Wow.
So the other day, I heard the most beautiful story, which I think is going to, I will likely cry when I tell it, because the last couple of times I've tried to tell it, I cry. So there's a friend of mine who has a 12-year-old daughter. And through the choices that they've made around parenting and the school, they've really like worked to sort of preserve her sense of self.
Yes.
Because my little girls are 6 and 8.5, and they both think they're fabulous. And I'm just really like, can we keep that for as long as possible? So I'm really, as a mom, leaning in hard on this.
Yes.
So this little girl, the 12-year-old, you know how at least when I was 12, I was pretty awkward.
Yeah.
Just in the cultural standard. Like, it's just like kind of like a funny.
Like I wore my headgear to school. That's how awkward
amazing.
I was. Yeah.
It's just kind of a funny time, like the in-between body and the outfits. Are we a child? Are we, what's happening? So, it's an awkward stage.
Very.
And at the age of 12, I was deeply aware of that awkwardness. This little girl was going to a wedding, and she looked at herself in the mirror, and she just said, I just look so beautiful. Like, I just feel so good. And I heard that story, and I just burst into tears, because I was like, how could we? Now, I know it is a story about visual beauty, but I think that, and I'm curious about this for you raising girls as well, because I think our culture has way too much of a focus of telling little girls they're pretty or that they look good.
Yes.
Just around anything. And like, we can also really celebrate, like, hey, that was so smart. You're so creative. Wow, it looks like you're having fun. Wow, all the things that we could talk about that aren't just physical beauty. And also, I find as a woman, like, I love celebrating my beauty, and so I want to talk about, we're gonna come back to like how valuable is visual beauty and where is its place. But this little girl, I was so struck by like the miracle of a 12-year-old little girl in that awkward phase, looking at herself in the mirror and having that sense of like, God, I'm gorgeous. And I was like, I want that for my kids. Yes. So my question is for you, now you made that stance and you had this awareness on the verge of 40. I know you do have, it's 11 years later now. So you probably came to it like a little after your girls were already possibly moving into adolescence, or maybe not. I don't know how old they are, and I don't really know what the timeline is. So how did you pass this along to your kids other than modeling, especially for your, do you have one daughter?
I have one daughter.
For your one girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's 21 now.
Okay, amazing.
I taught her, obviously modeling is a huge part of it, right? The way she hears me speak about the things I think about myself and the way I show up for myself. But more importantly, I think, was the message I would say to her over and over and over again is pay attention to how you feel living your life. Don't worry so much about how you look living your life. And over and over and over again. And also the positive attention, I guess I would say, was really centered around her love for acting, her very deep natural activist heart, her concern about global issues, the way she leads in her classrooms and asks, professors, can I lead a conversation about what's happening in the world that feels more pertinent than this other thing? Can we weave this piece in? So celebrating those things about her and making that the focus. Sure, she's a beautiful girl, but that was a blessing by genetics that just came together. She didn't do anything to earn that. Yeah. So I remember also taking a walk. I was doing a 60-mile walk for the Susan G. Komen Foundation when I was in my 30s and being really taken by a quote, and I'm going to forget who said it now, but it said something along the lines of, if you are beautiful at 16, that is not of your own doing. But if you're beautiful at 60, that was your soul's work. And I remember the impact at 30-some years old that made on me. And I thought, that's how I want to live. Yeah. I want the beauty to be radiating from my soul, having nothing to do with the external, look.
And when going back to the story about your grandmother's funeral, so it seems like from the story, correct me if I'm wrong, that what people were commenting on was more of a external,
only
purely visual.
Yes, that was what she was known
beauty,
for.
Because that was what she was focused on.
Yes.
And then there's the inner beauty, which does radiate right out of us at any age, regardless of what we are wearing, what makeup, the hair is irrelevant. Yes. And it is true. Like the feeling of internal beauty that what we are radiating in the world is a match for the beauty that is inside of us and that people can feel it in our presence. And our life is an extension of that.
Absolutely.
And then as your daughter I'm just going to ask you all the parenting questions.
Yeah, please. I don't have.
So I come from Maine. It is a very different culture than Miami.
Yes.
Like,
I'm from Ohio.
So,
Originally.
And then you raised your kids somewhat in Connecticut, right?
I've moved all over California, Boston, all Connecticut. Over. Yes.
Okay, cool. So Southern Florida is a very visual, beauty-focused culture in general.
Yes.
Very different from where I come from in Maine. Like, women in Maine don't maybe they're wearing like a tiny bit of mascara.
Yes.
Like, there's not really the conversation around Botox so much, or it's not like a thing that folks are talking now. Maybe more since I left. I don't know. I left 3 years ago. And so it's just been wild to come down here. And I witnessed it in my girls, just in this very simple ways. Right now, they both want to get their ears pierced, which I was told I had to wait until I was 13. I don't remember what the rationale was for that.
Same.
And same, yeah. And so it's so funny because originally I was like, no, you can't get your ears pierced. And then when they ask me why, I'm like, I don't have a good reason to tell you. But then same with they're watching, little girls are sometimes already in their school, their school goes up to 4th, 5th grade. They're starting to wear a little makeup here and there. And I'm like, and I'm really re-examining all my stuff around what's okay, what's not okay. And so, I'm doing that inner work, but I'm curious, when your daughter wanted to start wearing makeup or doing, I totally understand also that, I want to talk about the difference between medical procedures and mascara. Right?
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
we're talking,
yes.
Because it's a different thing. But I'm going to just ask the makeup question. How did you handle that? And when were you feeling supportive of her starting to wear makeup and whatever? Just real specifically.
Yes. I don't remember exactly how old she was, maybe 7th, 8th grade when she wanted to have mascara and things. And listen, I'm not anti-makeup. I'm not anti-beauty. What I am anti is this idea that you become obsessed. It becomes a fixation. This goalpost constantly moving of never being able to reach it, never being able to be enough. That's what I am most concerned about. It's tipped over into a very obsessive way of being and functioning now, and that is what is alarming. Anything that becomes that kind of fixation to the point where it's never enough, that you now have to alter yourself, and the looks of beauty are becoming so narrow now. That's what I find concerning. I don't find makeup concerning. I don't find beautiful clothes concerning. I find for me, it's primarily this aging, the denial. There's something I think quite different. The denial of human evolution and aging that you feel is somehow so embarrassing or so ugly or so unworthy that you have to erase it, you have to freeze it. That is what I am concerned about. And I know that this is a big concern for girls in their 20s and 30s, and they are hungry for leaders because I get stopped in the streets no matter where in the world I am. This is a global issue. So everywhere I go, without fail, young women approach me and thank me for my work because they tell me, we don't have role models. Thank you so much for leading us. So it is the reason why I continue on at the level with which I do, because I'm doing it for my daughter and all the girls who need a role model.
I love that so much. What is the difference for somebody? I think you just articulated it so well, but you're someone who, has taken a very clear stance that you find any kind of like medical, like injections, surgeries, that sort of thing, like concerning and disturbing because of the alteration of like actually who we are. Where do you see the difference? I think it's kind of obvious, but just in case for someone who's struggling with the difference between like enhancement of our beauty, wearing earrings, putting on some eyeliner, wearing mascara to make our eyes look like more awake and more open. Where does one end and the next begin for you, and what's the difference?
At the end of the day, if women decide they want to do enhancements, they want to do work on themselves, and that is not the question. I have clients come to me and they're like, I know you're anti-Botox and I get a lot of it, but I'm like, no, I'm not anti-Botox.
Now they're having Botox shame instead of wrinkle shame.
No, I think the fact that you're even bringing it up to me is interesting, I say to them, but I think if and when you were ever curious to look at what lives underneath that, it's not the Botox. The Botox is a symptom of something deeper that you are running from, right? And so it's about looking at that. It's never about shame. But I will tell you, as women, if we feel attacked and othered and shamed around every corner, we can't have any real conversations. And that I am not a stand for. It is time for us as women to have these hard, elevated conversations and not give 10 million trigger warnings or think, oh, now everyone's going to feel othered. They're going to feel shamed. They're going to feel bad. No. Yeah. Let's look at what we're doing with our own hands as women. We are the ones writing the rules every time we open our pocketbook and continue to say that I won't be worthy if I show up in the world, the way I am naturally. So I think it's more about that. And we can go on and on as how did that even become a concern for women, right? Like, how did we even get here where men don't seem to be as concerned about aging? I watched my husband reach, he's 6 years older than me. And I watched him as he was approaching his 40s and his 50s. And as he became gray, as he became, more wrinkled, it was not even a thought. It was just another day. It was just another decade. And in my eyes, he became even more sexy, even more refined, even more distinguished. Yeah. But I did have that thought, will he think that about me? Because he travels the world globally. He's insanely successful. He interacts and is with and next to beautiful women all day, every day. Is he going to come home and think, oh, I wish my wife looked smooth and
what a great adjective.
Smooth
for this ridiculous goal.
Right?
Smooth.
Or as if maybe she was younger than she is. Maybe she appeared younger than she is. But it's just a top value of mine that will never happen. And now it's so interesting, too, to watch because he was really curious when I stopped coloring my hair, what my reason was, why I, all of the questions he had. And I'm like, well, I'm super curious why you're not coloring yours.
Yeah.
And it was this moment for him of like, oh.
Well, and I will just say as like a, person just out there in the world, I find it to be really strange when older men color their hair. I think it looks so weird, but it is a complete double standard. I don't ever look at an older woman who colors her hair and think that's weird. To me, like visual, this is how our wiring works. It is just literally, that's what's going on in my neurons and my synapses that like man coloring his hair, weird, bizarre. Woman, fine, totally normal.
Yes.
And in fact, it's more unusual for natural, for the natural color. So, okay. Thank you so much for highlighting that it's not so much the resultant behavior, it's what's underneath it. Because I find in the work that I do that the same, it can look the same on the outside, like the behavior. Two people could do the same dance.
Yes.
And one of them could be doing those dance steps from a place of like, I need to prove myself, I'm unworthy, I'm inherently flawed. And the other one can be doing that dance from the place of like, I am whole and complete, and this dance is an expression of like the divinity of my soul. And on the external, we can never know. You can only know on the inside. Right. So is that kind of what you're saying in terms of women and aging and this ridiculousness about erasing the aging face?
I don't know how divine someone actually feels and how whole, the words you use, someone actually feels when they are putting, for all intents and purposes, it is rat poison into their face. I think that's how deep the marketing runs. That's how well we have been deluded to believe this is now in form of feminism. This is now in form of my body, my choice, my power. I think that women who believe that have taken hook, line, and sinker to the mass media marketing that has happened for us. That is billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. So if you delude yourself, if you decide to delude yourself and tell you that this is done under self-love and self-care, I would personally disagree.
Yeah.
I would personally disagree.
I applaud such a strong stance. Like you said, we have come to a time where there are so many trigger warnings. Yeah. There is so much apology.
We're not saying anything.
For just landing our opinion.
Yeah.
Especially when it's not a common one.
As a woman, if you have a strong opinion and everyone doesn't agree with you, then you are shaming other people. You are not being open and fair to everyone. And I refuse to not have an opinion about things. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to agree with me. I'm so okay with me and my stance. I don't need people. Judging by how quickly all of this has gone for me in my world of social media in just a couple of years, it's pretty obvious that women are hungry for this message. Yes. They're starving for a new narrative. I can't even read all of my DMs because of the amount that come in from women around the world and the love and the thank you so much. Please keep this going. That's all the proof I need. My message is for those women.
Okay. Couple things about that. Number one, I love that. It's such a deep service. And, something we talked about during our last interview.
Those files are corrupted.
Those were corrupted.
It was so juicy.
It was so juicy. So we're going to go there again. I want to talk about your relationship with money. So we're going to come back to that because one of the things I know about you is that this work comes from a deep place of service.
Yes.
By the way, work that we do because we need to make money and can be of service at the same time.
Yeah,
but I also know too that there wasn't like a pressing financial need. And so this is really like coming from a place of like, this is my mission. I got to do this. So amazing and such a deep service. Because I also am sure that not all of the messages you receive are positive and glowing. And so thanks for taking one for the team. And then
being a free agent is incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
Because I can be as free and I can say no. I have most offers I say no to. It's very rare I'm a yes because it has to be deeply, deeply aligned for me and my time.
Yeah.
So being a free agent is a wonderful thing and I feel the privilege of that.
So great. It's so great. But I think that there's a core level that we all are free agents on some deeper level. And I absolutely understand economic need. And I absolutely understand that sometimes it feels like we have to sacrifice our values at the altar of money. Yeah. And perhaps I will do a solo episode about this at another time, but I would encourage all of us to lean in and question those places where we might look at someone like you and say, well, easy for her to say whatever, and just really ask, how could I operate with that level of liberation with my set of circumstances?
Yes.
Because like it is available.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second thing I wanted to say, and I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the extraordinary growth of your business is that, like, hot marketing tip, having a controversial opinion and being unapologetic about it is very effective. And you are also very clear. It makes it easy to find you because you are like, this is my stance. This is what I am, standing up for. It's not, I know you didn't do it because it's controversial. It's because it's true.
No.
But
Other people just said it was controversial.
right.
I didn't.
It's just who you are. So you started your business talking about this in a public way how long ago?
4 years ago.
Only 4 years ago. You have a very large Instagram account. I don't know much about the rest of your business, but that's like from the outside, visible that way. So you started 4 years ago. And what did you start doing? Like, did you know what you were doing? How did you start? What inspired you?
Well, prior to that, I was in private practice. I have my doctorate. I'm a clinical psychologist. So I was in private practice before that, seeing one-on-one clients, right? Whoever could get in their car and drive to my studio,
and just,
I would see.
And around any
Women's
kind of
issues.
topic. Women, okay. So
Women, and occasionally they would bring their partner in. We would do couples therapy, right? That was kind of my specialty. And then I started doing group events. I started hosting different events for divorced women, new moms. I was running workshops. And so it was really becoming apparent to me how much women need each other. I always knew that, but it was really becoming more apparent in front of my very own eyes how rapidly women were claiming more for themselves or healing or moving mountains that before seemed immovable. So it was COVID happened, and my group sessions then went online because we couldn't meet in my studio, thinking it was just going to be a temporary thing. And I eventually did go back to the studio, but there was something in the back of my mind that kept saying, oh my gosh, I could reach more women if I decide to do this online. I knew nothing about social media. I knew nothing about, barely had a website, had nothing. I still had like old-fashioned business cards.
Yeah.
I'm like, how am I going to make this happen? I have no idea. Next thing I knew, it started to organically unfold when women would say, hey, my sister lives in Kansas. Can she join our group? Hey, my sister lives in Dubai. Can she be a part of this? It just started word of mouth growing and growing. And then I decided to close my studio because my husband said, let's move to South Florida and try the boating lifestyle. And even though we're both still working full-time and very, very busy, location-wise, we prefer being here right now. And I thought this will be perfect. Now I can do everything online. And so it just really happened very naturally. It unraveled in the way that it was meant to. I wasn't really, I don't want to say I wasn't trying. It just happened. And the very first video I put on TikTok went viral. Yeah, I put it up, and then I woke up the next morning and I was
what was it about?
Shocked that I wouldn't be coloring my hair anymore. But I already had stopped coloring my hair years prior. I was telling the story.
Right. I've stopped years ago.
Yes.
Also, I won't start again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so
you were
it was
telling
me
the background.
telling the story. Yes. And it went viral and people went crazy. I was like, oh, wow.
Wow.
Didn't even seem like that big of a deal.
But what a great example from a business perspective of like the DNA of who we are, we take for granted.
Oh,
We take for granted many of the most interesting things about us.
yes.
We take for granted many of the most valuable things about the work that we do.
Yes.
Which is why community like what you create, communities like what I create are so important because we cannot see ourselves straight. It's why the coaching industry exists. It's why, therapy is so beautiful. We need each other to reflect back.
That's my tattoo,
does it say?
Ubuntu. It's an
Oh,
African
yes.
Zulu term. It means I exist because you are here. And we need each other. We're coexisting because you bring talents and gifts that I need, and I bring things that you need, and vice versa. So as communities, as we come together, we all can optimize ourselves. We can be inspired by each other. We can support one another. And I don't think we were meant to do this in isolation. And this time in particular, in our world, I feel like we are becoming more and more isolated, and why these communities that you build, that I build, are really necessary.
They really are.
Really necessary.
And to take them offline when possible, because it's really interesting. Your trajectory was like, okay, started in person, then COVID, then went online. Obviously, then you can have a global impact. So smart, so brilliant. You've grown this huge online community. And then also I know, and we'll talk about it more at the end, I know that also now you're going to create your big live events for people to come back in person, because we can only take the connection so far.
Yes,
virtually.
Absolutely.
So, okay. I love that.
And I'm really missing the in-person stuff.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. Media.
Yes.
Social media.
Yes.
We're talking about what a beautiful thing it is for creating impact, for creating a business, for, getting ideas out there that we wouldn't necessarily have access to if we were all just in our own insular communities.
Right.
And also, it is one of the number one purveyors of toxic brainwashing.
Yes.
That is responsible for the very thing that you are speaking out against.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, because you have kids who are older than mine are, what were some of your guidelines? What was some of your thinking around your kids with phones and social media specifically, but just media in general?
Yes, absolutely. I have a very strong stance for myself personally, and I speak openly about it to my daughter and to my clients, and then encourage them to consider doing the same for themselves, even trying it for a 30-day experiment and noticing if they feel any different. So for my daughter, when she first started having social media and Instagram, I would sit down next to her and she would scroll, and I said, show me your feed. Who are you following? And we would stop on certain ones. I'm like, so tell me, why do you follow this person? Oh, for this reason, this reason, reason. Oh, okay. Do you feel good when you look at their things? Yeah. Oh, seems like maybe there's some hesitation there. We'll come back to this one. Scroll again. Oh, why do you follow her? Oh, she's so beautiful. And she's like this really famous model. And do you feel good when you are on her page? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel creative? Do you get new ideas? She's like, no. Like, then why do you follow her? Right? So teach people how to be more curious. Teach people to do their own thinking that takes it to a deeper level, which I did for myself. If you were to grab my phone and look at my feed, I follow people who I have chills right now because I am impeccable in who I follow. I follow people who uplift the world, who inspire me, who make me think beyond my limitations for myself. I don't waste my time of my one and only precious life having people who are there for just posing. I'm not interested in posing. Like if that's the world we're living in, I want no part of it. I'm so proud to admit I have never watched a single episode of a reality TV show. I have absolutely no interest watching other people live their life. I'm so busy creating my own. And so I've raised all of my kids, my 3 boys as well, under this consideration and this lens. And I talk to my clients about this, that you may think you are just watching some housewives show, reality show, for entertainment to shut your brain off. I guarantee you, when you go to bed at night, your unconscious is processing a lot of what you saw. Oh, yes. Just like we take food in, everything we take in has an effect on our lives. So we get to decide. And I am impeccable with what I eat. I'm impeccable with what I watch, what I take in all forms and fashions. That's why I can vibrate so high. Yeah. Because I'm only taking in high quality in all regards, in all 5 senses.
Mm-hmm. So after you, and this episode will come out later, I'm interviewing a hypnotherapist named Grace Smith. And in her book, she talks about that we actually, when we're consuming media, we are more in a theta brain state. And it actually is kind of a form of hypnotism. And we are our most suggestible at that time. And so we really can't just be like, oh, it's just entertainment. It's just a movie.
Not.
It's just, whatever. It's just a model's Instagram feed or whatever. It's not. It's like, I wouldn't eat Cheetos all day and be like, oh, it's just Cheetos.
I wouldn't just eat Cheetos all day and be like, I wonder why I don't feel good. I wonder why my stomach hurts. I wonder why. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
The same thing. Like I think that I didn't realize how big of a deal it is, though I notice it come up as a mama bear, because when my girls start watching something where they talk to each other in a certain way or whatever, I'm like, oh no, we're immediately turning this off. Like there's just a feeling of like, oh no, that is not going into your psyche
Yes.
as like a way of being or any way of suggestion of a goal. Like,
During such an impressionable time too.
yeah,
right?
yeah. Before the age of 7, we're like always basically in that theta brainwave.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time we can come into it, and we are when we're scrolling, when we're reading stories, when we're watching stories, when we're consuming media. Okay. So you do seem to operate at a pretty high level with a high level of judiciousness about what goes onto your calendar, what comes into your life, what goes into your body, your thoughts, all of those things. Was there a particular moment where there was like a before and after? Did you grow up in a household where there was a lot of consciousness around this sort of thing? How did you get this way?
I think I remember being 8 years old and being very inquisitive and actually getting in trouble for my level of inquisitiveness and curiosity. Like for me, nothing was ever what it seemed. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know, okay, so that's the story you tell everybody, but what were you actually feeling and thinking, and what happened? What made you decide to do that? And it would be that question of like, they used to call me Mandy. Mandy, just quit with all the questions. So I think I've always had this form of curiosity. And so I'm trying to think of when it really, really turned on. But I mean, if we were to lay out my whole life, I've done pretty much everything not by the book in every regard, even when it comes to medical choices, when it comes to birthing my children, when it comes to natural healing for one of my children, when it comes to supporting children who've made different choices about their expressions in this world. There's nothing for me that's off the table. I'm willing to get behind a higher state of consciousness everywhere. And I think I also operate with love at the core. And so with the curiosity, with openness and willingness and love as my base, I feel like I have kind of morphed into or created the most dreamy way of operating that works for me. So I asked myself, Amanda, does this feel loving? Does this feel so nourishing before I interact with somebody, before I do something for myself? Is this really the best way? If you only have 45 minutes this morning, is this the most nourishing way to spend time with yourself? Right? In all of the ways. So I think that for me, it's really just so much consciousness around the way I am choosing everything, because it's one go round. And I really want to optimize it as much as I possibly can in my thoughts, in my body, in my heart, and my soul.
Yeah. And when we spoke last time, I remember we were talking a little bit about your relationship with money and how that has shifted. And I'm curious, like, as a business owner, how does your relationship with money impact your ability to be out here growing when the truth is that what you're talking about is incredibly economically disruptive.
Oh, yes.
And I love that. You know, we vote with our dollars by what we spend money on. And
I wrote that exact line in my book.
Oh, okay, great. I can't wait to read your book. So when does it come out? Do you know?
January.
Oh, January. Okay,
Yes.
great. So I'm just curious, like, can you tell me about what your relationship is like with money now, and what possibly was required to update it as your abundance expanded?
My relationship with money was that there is never enough of it. You have to work in painfully hard amounts of your life to earn a little bit, but you'll still never have enough. And it is elusive. So I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was young, my dad left, and my mom had zero education. So she was working 2 and 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. We were on food stamps for a while, and there was a lot of shame around not having money. So I think that my relationship with money ever so slowly evolved and changed when I started to make my own money, and first was terrified about spending any of it, and really having this belief of like, but what if I can't get any more? What if I can't generate this again? And then over time, I felt safer and safer and safer as I trusted myself to constantly receive money. And when I shifted the belief that money is an energy, just like everything else that we experience in this lifetime. So me holding on to it so tightly was also going to probably affect the way it came in for me. So every time, even still, I have this practice of every time I pay someone, like I paid my team in the car before I came in, right? Every time I pay someone, I pay them with a generous heart. I get very emotional about it actually, because I pay them knowing that my voice, this work I do in the world, is only possible because they have the talents that they have. And that otherwise it would just be me sitting, you know, with these thoughts and not having this megaphone to my heart the way that they have helped me do that. Also, everyone that helps in any other way or form or fashion of my life. I just recently purchased, last week we signed the papers, my mother and her husband, a beautiful condo here in South Florida. And my mom and I said, did we ever think, like this turn of events, that we'd have this moment where she wasn't sure how we were going to eat? And now here, her daughter was buying her this beautiful place to live. And it really did come with changing the mindset. I see she still has that mindset, but that's okay because I have so much abundance in my heart and in my financial situation that I want to share. And I also believe that money is an amplifier. If you have a good and full and rich heart, money will only amplify that. And if you are corrupted and evil and greedy, money will showcase that as well. So money amplifies. So if you're a beautiful, amazing person, why wouldn't the universe trust money to come into your hands? Because you'll do beautiful things with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a thread between what you speak about with worthiness and beauty and aging and what you're speaking about here. And I want to highlight that like the root foundation is there's like a deep sense of infinite inherent worth in you that is showing up in your business. In your fortitude that you have to claim what I know you didn't like, you weren't like, oh, this is going to be unpopular, but to claim a belief that is not common. Maybe it's not, I think it's actually quite popular, but maybe not as common. It's groundbreaking, right? It's groundbreaking, like to be able to just put your antenna up and be like, this is what I'm claiming. And then in your money, and then in the way that you are judicious about what ends up on your calendar, what ends up in your body, what all of those things, like they're all coming from that root of deep worthiness, which it sounds like you came in with to some degree and then worked on over time. And is there anything in particular that you still lean into that helps you to amplify or dip into that source of worth on a regular basis?
You know, I just had a vision when you were talking about when I was little and my dad stopped coming to see us and started a new family 3 miles down the road.
Wow.
And I had to tell the story for a while that he just didn't know any better. Someday he was going to figure out that I was really amazing, and then it was going to all click for him. Well, unfortunately, that day didn't really come. We did kind of see each other for 5 days before he died. We spent together, but and he was not a part of my life prior to that. And I don't know how it happened. I feel so wildly thankful because it's a huge thread of the work I do now for women is helping them realize that they were born worthy. Every single human being is born worthy. And then our decision is we get to decide, like, will I protect that under all circumstances? Or will I allow the world to dictate and tell me that's not actually true? This is how you'll be worthy for me, for the world, for this space, for this conversation. I have just decided that I will protect my worthiness with everything that I have. Even as a little girl, I knew that he made a mistake. I never took it on as there must be something wrong with me. So I don't know where that came from. I'm so grateful that it happened and that I have that rooted in me, but it's a deep, and I use that word and that language a lot. I feel deeply rooted like an old oak tree. I feel like the roots are wide and deep, and I'm pretty unshakable because I source from here. I don't source from my husband or my children or how much money comes into my bank account each week.
Or the smoothness.
No, or at all. Actually, I might actually tend the other way. Yeah. The more gray, the more wrinkles, the more things, I'm in awe.
Yeah.
I'm in awe.
Well, it's such evidence of a life
It
well
is.
lived. You know, it really is.
And I want to see it all.
So what about for someone listening who's like, I'm not a deeply rooted tree. Like it doesn't feel like my worth comes from, like, how do they tap into that? What's one thing they might be able to do to start to reconnect with that worth?
This is a hard one for women. I have two things technically. One of the most primary practices that I teach in my work, and one of the things that I have women do from the beginning of our time together, is begin a mirror practice. And I know it's very hard for women, shockingly, to spend any amount of time in the mirror, because the relationship with the mirror has always been, let me go to identify all that is wrong, all that needs to be fixed. And I approach it from, let me come to see the reverence and be in reverence. Let me come to see the majesty and the divinity here, and stay until you feel that. And what happens for women, the way they tell me, and I know for myself, I felt cellular change after 90 days of committing to mirror practice for myself, that I'm going to come here before I even turn my phone on in the morning. I'm going to come here and I'm going to stand and I'm going to be in awe of what is, not what used to be, what may happen in the future, what is right here and now. And with that, you start your day from a groundedness, because I'm witnessing, it's the same as we go to see a sunrise or we stand with our feet in the sand at the ocean. If I allow it long enough, Kate, I'm witnessing Mother Nature. It's a miracle. It's a miracle that you're here, that any of us are here.
It is.
And to bypass that, wow, I don't want to miss it. So every day I stand there, and from that energy, I then go into the world and I love harder and I create more and I keep showing up, because I remembered for those 3 minutes every morning that it's all okay. It's all beautiful, just as it is right here, right now.
It's so gorgeous. And I've been doing that a little bit since I first started listening to some of your stuff, and it is beautiful. And when I remember it, it is powerful. And sometimes it is a little uncomfortable at the beginning, but like pretty soon it just feels really good. And I'm not new to this sort of thing, so like it might be more available, but I do want to say for those listening, like, it is a rewiring. Like, we are looking in our own eyes, being present with ourselves. It is a repatterning, and it will get easier and easier. And are you at that time just, making eye contact in the mirror? Are you saying anything? Does it vary on day to day?
It varies on day to day, depending. I pay attention to what I need, right? And what's going on for me. So it really is eye contact. For some people, it's about sending love to certain parts of their body that they've really been uncomfortable with. I do that as well. But I think it is really about this idea of, yes, it is this rewiring, but it's building self-intimacy. We go into the world seeking intimacy and being seen. I assure you, and I know you know this, but this is for everyone listening, is that we can't actually build true intimacy with other people until we've met ourselves, until we've gone into the deep recesses of our heart and our soul and our shadows and our wounds and our fears. Until we can't do it in a way that actually is going to be sustainable long-term with someone else, right? And then what happens is you become dependent on the first person who pays you a little bit of attention, who tosses you a dried breadcrumb, and you're like, oh, it's a feast. You're delusional because you haven't built any of that self-intimacy within. So you're taking what you believe to be intimacy, which is usually not quite even close.
Not it. Totally not it. Okay. So as we kind of bring this home, what if you were to say, like, what is the world that you envision when your daughter is on the verge of 40 in 20 years from now, or slightly less? What do you want that world to be for her at that juncture?
I want that world to be just in the same way my kids cannot believe I used telephones where I had to dial each number, or then maybe my mom would pick up from the other room and listen in. In that same world that feels unfathomable to them, I want, when my daughter's 40, for it to be unfathomable that women used to inject poison into themselves and call it a beauty treatment. They used to do these modifications and believe that then they would be more worthy. I want it to be like they're aghast at the fact, like, do you believe that the women used to do that?
Right.
Could you believe they didn't understand how profoundly stunning and gorgeous and worthy and beautiful they were? What were they thinking? Oh my gosh. In the same way we now think about lobotomies. You know, when people used to have mental illness, they would remove the frontal lobe. When women were pregnant and gaining a lot of weight, smoke some cigarettes. It'll help to curb your appetite.
Or even I'm thinking about the practice of foot binding,
Yes.
you know, like that would just be,
Yes.
what?
Yes.
Like what?
So barbaric. I hope that it's so barbaric when my daughter is my age.
That's specific. Thank you.
You're
Thank you. Okay. So if people want to find out more, lean into this work, possibly attend your live event, where should they go?
Just come to Instagram. You can find everything there. It's Midlife Muse. And I will be sharing everything that is happening, how to be involved in one form, fashion, or another. And there's content that will definitely stir something in you, either an inferno for the good, or that you may want to delete and block me immediately. I don't know. But either way, I am all for elevating our conversation, whether I see you at an in-person event of mine, whether I meet you online, or you read my book that comes out in January, or start listening to my podcast that comes out in May. We have...
What's it called?
It's called, it's named Midlife Muse because
Right.
we're really keeping all of the branding super tight.
Very wise and efficient.
But then it's called, the subtitle is Things Your Mother Never Told You, because no one ever told her.
That's beautiful. That's super beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel blessed in this moment that my mom told me a lot of good stuff. But there's plenty.
I love
that we
your mom.
Yeah, she's great. She's great. She's an original.
She taught me a lot of things back in the childbirthing days. I learned a lot of things from
glad.
natural childbirth
That's
from her.
amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank
you
you,
for your
Kate.
generosity and like that deep connection, because the overflow is felt and it's really abundant and generous. And I'm just grateful for you.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed every minute. Both times.